Okay, great, thanks. And thank you everybody who stayed till the very last presentation. So just before we get started, we will be talking about copyright. So we just want to remind you that even though we will be discussing some legal terms and issues, we are not lawyers and we are not providing legal advice. And if you have some legal questions, we advise you to consult an intellectual property attorney. So got that out of the way. A little bit about us.
So, like mentioned, hi everyone, my name is Fatima Rad. I'm the acquisitions librarian at Farmingdale. I'm in charge of collection development, especially the physical collection, as well as all of our social media stuff, just in case of our library is an academic library located on Long Island.
And I'm Danielle Apfelbaum, and I am the Scholarly Communication Librarian at Greenlee Library at Farmingdale State College, where I work with Fatima. I manage our institutional repository, serve as the campus OER lead, and I consult with faculty on a variety of issues, including copyright and open access publishing.
Okay, so if you can participate in the chat, we'd love to hear from you guys. So what streaming media services do you currently provide to your patrons, if you do? And what have you been getting questions about? What are they interested in? So we'll give you guys some time to pop in your answers, or if you want to unmute and just shout out your answer, that'll be great. Wow, so
When you say streaming media services, so like Mount St. Mary provides the Canopy streaming media service. That's one that we do.
awesome. Do you guys ever get requests from students or faculty for like Netflix or Showtime or any of that stuff?
I can only imagine the librarians do, although I
Yeah.
don't receive the requests directly, but I can imagine.
Got it. And then someone said Films on Demand at Columbia Green Community College. Nice. We actually just let go of Films on Demand. Yeah, Hoopla, Canopy, Libby, Overdrive. Nice.
Okay, so variety.
Yeah.
Okay, so streaming services. So this graphic is a little bit old. It's from November 2019. So Disney Plus and Apple TV have since launched, but HBO Max and Peacock are coming later this year from what we have heard. As you can see, the market for streaming media is growing, and it's growing really quickly. So from a consumer perspective, this is pretty exciting, but for libraries who are going to inevitably be bombarded with increasing requests for access to programming that's exclusive to these service providers, it's a little nightmarish for us right now. And that's because, as Fatima and I have learned in working together, that developing mechanisms for institutional access and licensing doesn't really seem to be a priority for these service providers right now. And that's why we wanted to do this session. We wanted to share our experiences with working within these constraints. But we also want to know the difficulties that you're facing in your libraries and how you're working around them. So to that end, we're going to begin with some of the constraints and strategies that we're facing, and then we would like to hear from you. So we hope this is a pretty interactive session where you'll be able to answer our questions in the chat. Okay, so from a scholarly communications perspective, streaming media for remote access is constrained by a number of factors. One of the most problematic aspects of dealing with film and streaming media in an academic library is the set of assumptions that inform our faculty's expectations. So faculty know that they can show films in the context of a face-to-face course without infringing on copyright, but unfortunately, this is not a one-to-one exchange when it comes to distance learning. So many faculty believe that we, the librarians, can just push a button and poof, a title gets added to our catalog. But as we know, not every streaming service provides a digital version of a desired film. So even when the service does provide a digital version, the platform may not be equipped for institutional distribution and licensing. So faculty often think we can just digitize a VHS or DVD in response to that and upload it to the learning management system. From a technological standpoint, this isn't always feasible. Not every library has the tools to migrate film from one format to another. And even if they do, not every learning management system or even a secure repository can handle the large file sizes that are associated with digital film. From a copyright perspective, digitizing and ripping materials is even more problematic. To discuss that, we have to start with the exclusive rights that are afforded to copyright holders. So according to Title 17 copyright law affords copyright holders the exclusive right to reproduce a work, to prepare derivative works, to distribute copies, to perform and display the copyrighted work, and to perform the copyrighted work publicly by means of a digital audio transmission. So digitizing a film without the permission of a copyright holder potentially violates the copyright holder's exclusive right to reproduce the work. Sharing a copy of the digitized film, whether it's on a flash drive or a rewritable DVD or as a file in the learning management system, without permission potentially violates the copyright holder's exclusive right to distribute copies of the work. Now, you might think, well, isn't my use considered fair use? And the truth is, not necessarily. Fair use considers 4 factors: the purpose of the use, the nature of the work itself, the substantiality of the portion of the work used, and the effect of that use on the market for the work. So while fair use favors educational uses of a copyrighted work, this aspect doesn't necessarily outweigh all the other 3 factors. So for instance, fair use tends to fall in favor of informational or educational materials, but less so with materials created primarily for entertainment purposes, like motion pictures. Another consideration, how much of the work do you actually need to accomplish your objective? So if you're sharing an entire work when just an excerpt would be sufficient, your use is less likely to be defensible under the fair use exception. And finally, you need to consider if by providing the materials, you're removing the need for the user to purchase them. In other words, if you hadn't disseminated that item, would it be reasonable to believe that the user would have purchased that item at, let's say, a fair price? So if the answer is yes, then this really doesn't work in favor of a fair use defense. Finally, there's the issue of control over copyrighted materials that are reproduced. So in Section 110, they're very specific about the level of control that's required when it comes to exemptions for specific performances or displays. The performance or display has to be an integral part of the course or related to teaching the content of the course. And in addition to that, it needs to be made only to students who are enrolled in the course. The institution needs to have and communicate a policy regarding copyright and letting students know that the materials are being used, may be subject to copyright protection. And finally, this is a really tricky part, and I'm going to read it word for word. The institution applies technological measures that reasonably prevent students from retaining and disseminating the transmitted work beyond the course session in which it's required, and does not engage in conduct that could reasonably be expected to interfere with technological measures used by copyright owners to prevent such retention or unauthorized further dissemination. So while sharing resources in a learning management system might seem secure because the material is available only to the enrolled learners, the truth is that it's really easy to rip audio and video files. I'm not particularly technologically savvy, but with very simple screen recording tools and a couple of cables, I could really easily bootleg a video file that I would otherwise not be able to download. That's if I were so inclined. Of course, I would never do that, but the truth is I could, and I could do it very easily. And if I can figure it out, you better believe any motivated user could figure out how to do it as well. The problem with this is that it falls on the institution to make every possible effort to prevent users from reproducing and disseminating the content beyond the course. And that's just really, really, really difficult. So in a nutshell, digitizing or ripping digital media and posting it to a learning management system or even a secure repository isn't really an option for many of us because it comes with such significant risk. So from the scholarly communications perspective, the only option is to obtain an institutional subscription to the service or license individual titles from the service. But as Fatima is going to explain, what's right from the scholarly communications perspective isn't always easy from an acquisitions perspective.
Right. So throughout this process for the past few years, Danielle and I have been in close contact, going back and forth with everything. So I am primarily in charge of the physical collection. So working for a state institution, we have a lot of barriers when purchasing just an actual book. So when it came to this, it was a whole nother monster. The first time I was approached with it, I kind of shrugged it off and I said, you know, we can't really purchase a digital version. But as it increased, I had to start looking more into it. So sometimes I would look out and I would be able to find a digital copy. But the big problem that we're noticing now is a lot of these streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, they're all creating their own content just for their platform. So the only way to access it is through a subscription, and that's where we're finding a lot of issues. So trying to justify all these purchases gets really hard and also really expensive. There's a growing need for this, and that's easily seen through just library listservs, reaching out to other librarians, and the general feeling that I got was everyone wants an answer, but everyone's also scared to approach this because there are all these legal implications, all these rules, but in a weird way, with all these rules and constraints, there's actually no guidance and there are no proper rules to help us. So while I would search for vendors to try to find digital copies for me, something that our institution is big on, and as a librarian that I'm big on, is there's a lot of accessibility rules that we have to follow. So some of these don't even have things like closed captioning, or they can't guarantee that there will be closed captioning when we purchase it until we get it, hit play and play around with the options. So for that case, that would be a hard no. The other thing that we have done is, well, I have spent hours on the phone with HBO, Amazon Prime, Showtime, and Netflix. And when you talk to them, you realize that they themselves also don't have clear rules. So it's kind of just like barriers upon barriers of trying to figure out where you can go. And this causes issues mostly for not just the users and the patrons, it also becomes an issue with communication and the library. So in an academic library, from my point of view, is when faculty come and approach me and they ask for something, if they hear a hard no, in their mind it's, wow, the library is not capable of doing this, or the library won't do this. It takes a lot of time to talk it through with them, whoever your user is, whether it's the student or the faculty, and try to explain to them, hey, it's not that we're ignoring you or we can't, it's all of these implications are causing us to stop. So it's also why I've been very mindful in taking more time when I do get these requests. And in the next slide, we'll see how this kind of has opened up a bit more leeway for communication with our patrons.
Sorry, couldn't get my mic back on for a minute. So we've developed some strategies working together, some workarounds for communication, and also figuring out how to get students access to these films, even if we can't license them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about discussing constraints with faculty and also identifying some low cost or no cost options. So an important part of helping faculty, and Fatima touched on this before, is having an honest discussion about the constraints that libraries are facing in helping them get access to these materials for their students. So in my experience, again, just like Fatima, when you tell a faculty member we can't do something, they often hear, we just don't want to do it. And so it's really important to counter these narratives before they take hold. So my conversations often begin with, we would love to help you make this film available to your students, but unfortunately, the problem is on the service provider's end. We need them to provide mechanisms to make the services available at an institutional level, and they aren't doing that. I'm also really honest about the return on investment for the requests. Is it a responsible use of institutional funds to acquire permissions for a film, and these could run hundreds to thousands of dollars, if it's possible for students to view the film either during a free trial to a service, or if not through a free trial, by obtaining a really low cost rental of the film where available? So to this end, I usually compile a list of all the alternative resources, whether that's how to get a free trial at Netflix or Amazon Prime, or where these videos are available, again, like on Amazon Prime, and what the cost is to rent it regular or in HD. And I provide that with the faculty so that they can provide that information to their students.
So reaching out to service providers sounds a little weird and very time consuming, and that's exactly what it is. It is very time consuming, and it can also be very frustrating. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the service providers that you're talking to, they don't have an answer and they don't know what to tell you. So when I contacted Netflix, it was because I had found on their website an educational page where it says you can stream it, and then it has all this vague language where it's like you can stream it, but it's also not legal. After talking to them, anyone who has a paid subscription to Netflix, they can stream Netflix original series to their students, but it's only in class. So like Danielle mentioned, our online class, that's not allowed. Netflix also has random, very weird rules that you have to get from them. So for example, the library had an event with the student club and they wanted to stream something in the library. And we got a list of things that we are and aren't allowed. So we got approval that we can play it for more than one day, but we're not allowed to ever use the Netflix logo. So you really have to take your time to figure out what you can and can't use for free, and to make sure there aren't any legal implications for the library or the user or anyone. When I talked to HBO, we have a sports management class. There are a lot of documentaries they wanted from HBO. I found out that HBO actually has a parent company that a lot of libraries normally use and order from. It's called Infobase, and they have a specific group of support for librarians. So they know how to help us. They can give the DVD copy or the multi-use users and different contracts. So that was actually very helpful because I didn't think that would be possible through HBO. So that was great. The other one that we usually use is PBS. PBS has a lot of digital documentaries as well. And again, they also have a separate phone number where you can contact them, and they'll give you all their links on how to purchase anything that's streamed digitally. Faculty sometimes just don't like coming into the library to pick it up. I don't know why that's so burdensome to them, but apparently that's an issue. But when it comes to, hey, the library will purchase this for you and you can use it whenever versus you can't use it at all, they'll take the other option. The other thing that comes up is we have a reserve collection, which is usually for textbooks, and we also have DVDs. Our DVDs normally don't circulate, but if you're faculty, of course, we let them out. And sometimes we allow our students as well. What we have done so far this year especially was an increase is there's a lot of DVDs and movies that students want to stream and show on campus for their events. So when it's a physical DVD, it's great because I can get the streaming rights. But again, when it comes to finding an HBO one, it gets a lot more difficult. So creating different collaborations and talking to different groups on campus and having a committee has been really helpful, because now faculty will take the time to talk. They realize that we're not magical wizards and we can't do something like this in a day. We have faculty who work with me for about all of the fall semester. We go through lists, we try to see what we can get, what we can't get, what's a good substitute. And I think a big part of them playing such an active role going through all of this has helped them understand a lot more. And they kind of turned into sort of ambassadors for the library, where they tell their other department or their students, and they try to work it out. So if we can't get something, they are a lot more understanding, or we try to work an alternative.
Okay, so this is the part where we'd like you to talk to us. So this might seem kind of like a duh question, but we thought it was an important one to ask. So of course, we think that libraries definitely have a role to play in the acquisition and provision of streaming media services to patrons and learners. And many are already doing this with services like Avon, Films on Demand, Canopy, and so on. But there's still a lot of stuff that these services can't provide that patrons do want. So with the growing number of streaming services and the programming that's not available on most of these library subscription streaming media platforms, we have to ask, is the time and effort worth it for your particular library? So you can talk to us in the chat. We want to know what you think.
This is Nancy. I'm so glad you're presenting on this. This is a big issue for our library right now. And we did have the experience with faculty requesting one single title that they wanted for their distance learning class. And then after this crisis, a faculty wanted another streaming video. And so what worked for the professor who wanted this single title, it is available on Films on Demand. And when we told them how much it would cost for the licensing, they were like, "That's ridiculous. That's so much." But when the director and actually the librarians, we had been wanting to go with streaming or at least try it for a long time. So he decided that we purchase the whole education package for a year and see how it went. And so another English professor wanted a video that is available on, I think, also Films on Demand. So they offered us a trial subscription, an extended trial subscription to another package. But I guess, that can be, it starts getting costly. And my question to you, or now or later, is how do we promote the use of all of those videos? I mean, academic video on what's the Alexandra Street, the company that just bought them. There's thousands and thousands of videos. How do we make it cost effective so that the use justifies the cost? I'll mute myself now.
Daniel, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to stab it?
You take a stab at it.
All right. So I'm glad that your faculty at least understand the cost. That's actually what has been helpful for me. Sometimes just being very, very clear with them, like, hey, we have this amount of budget for your department. So sports management is an expensive department. I use them because they're a very vocal department and I actually appreciate it. So when they ask for certain films, I ask them, okay, will this actually be used for at least like 5-6 years, or do you just want this for one class that has one section for next semester, maybe, and that's it? When you break it down like that, that has been helpful. When it's a class face-to-face, for me, it's a lot easier because it is affordable. When it's an online class, that's when Danielle has to take a stab at it and it's harder. And she has given them so many different options. We tell them, hey, if you time it correctly, your students can do the free trial. And then at the same time, we're like, but maybe you should look at alternative methods that are more affordable. Let's try to figure out movies that are free online. Let's try to figure out DVDs that we can purchase and your students can watch it in the library. So for a lot of our modern language classes are actually online, and they all actually require like 10 movies to be watched. And when they gave me that issue, she said, the professor was very, very stern, and she's like, no, they have to be digitally online. We're a very big commuter school, and I told them we have a large number of students who come to the library. And I was like, I can find all these DVDs for you, and I can make them all available in the library, and they can purchase them. So after giving her that option, she actually opted for that one. We have the DVDs there, the students come, they watch them in there, or if they need an exception, we let them take them out. I think we're at the point where professors just have to make more of an effort to collaborate with us. The committee that I started was Collection Development Committee, and the professors who work with me in that committee kind of realized that, oh, like, you kind of have to work with the librarians. You can't just make these demands, and it's not only about their class, which they don't like to hear. It's more about all the students and how we can best accommodate our budget to serve all of them. And that's kind of been the approach we've been taking so far.
Yeah, and I think that the streaming media services that we have are great, but I think we run into the problem where it's like, I want to use it, but you don't have that one film or documentary that I need from that service. And so that's where it becomes problematic. But just in terms of, I was just thinking about, how do you promote these services so that, they're worth what you're spending on them. And one of the things I like to do, being that I'm not just the scholarly communications librarian, but all of the librarians in our department teach, I like, anytime I look at a syllabus when I'm going to teach a class, I go through the data, I used to go through Films on Demand. We're going to be switching soon. And if I found something that I thought was relevant, I would just let the faculty member know, hey, this might be of interest. So I think it's easier to promote certain things when you have something like a liaison program like we do, or when your librarians are teaching, because you get to know really quickly what people are using. We're switching to Avon. It's the Alexander Street Press, I believe, through ProQuest. Am I getting this right, Fatima?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we'll move on to the
Sorry,
second.
there was one quick question. We're switching because money. It was just, we got a cheaper deal. That was it. We gave the professors like a whole semester heads up. And honestly, we've been checking, the titles are pretty similar. So we haven't really been seeing anything that a professor uses only something that's only available on phones on demand. So it hasn't, hopefully won't impact us too much, the switch. Well,
Okay, so let's move on to question 2.
yeah, so obviously we can't give this to you guys right now, unfortunately, but it's something that we would like to do. What would you like to see in a toolkit for dealing with streaming media in your library? Ours is very specific to our campus and our college. So we were wondering what other librarians are struggling with. So weaning them off the YouTube habit. Could you elaborate on that?
Is this an issue of like relying too much on YouTube, like not understanding that it could disappear at any time? So if you're relying on that, it may not be there when you need it. Is that the kind of reason that we're talking about weaning them off YouTube?
Not sure. I'll wait for her to respond. Tracy said model licensing language. That would be, yes.
That would be helpful.
That'd be very helpful. What we've been doing, Danielle and I, for the past semester is I would just send her screenshots of random things I'd find. And I'm like, save this, it'll come to use in the future, or we can at least look back at it.
Oh, as an ad-free alternative.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you want to, I mean, anything can go on YouTube. And I've actually had this discussion with faculty members where they've found copies of documentaries or newscasts. And they were like, oh, I can use it because they put it up on YouTube. And it's like, actually, the person who put it on YouTube isn't the copyright holder. So that could be a problem. You know, you get into the issue of if you know it's a bootleg copy and you're sending students there could be some liability. So yeah, that's interesting. We have had that conversation, but not as in depth. But I usually tell them it could disappear at any time. And yes, again, it gets interrupted by ads. You don't know what's been edited out. That's another big issue, especially if it's segments. You don't know if you're getting the whole thing.
Nancy said price, content, and ease of use comparison lists. I know for me, I have like all the streaming services bookmarked. So I have the free times and free trials memorized because that's been our weird alternative. But yeah, having a proper chart would be better. And then Tracy said various business models for purchasing. Yes.
That's a great point about
the deep fake. Yeah.
Very true.
That actually came up in one of the classes that I taught. It's one of the professional communication classes. And in it, I usually show them fake or very weirdly, clearly altered stuff. And usually they're in forms of YouTube. And the students actually did a great job of pointing it out. It was actually, professor didn't really like it. And he's like, yeah, sometimes you guys put up YouTube videos and we can tell that it was cut up. And I was like, oh, wow, that's terrifying. So we're also working with the younger generation who are a lot more savvy with like cutting and editing videos, and they actually pick up on it a lot more. So that could be another point to highlight for them on why you should try to maybe stay away from YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, and our final question for you is, what strategies have you employed to deal with some of the issues that we've discussed? And what can and should we be doing as a profession, whether you're in academic or public libraries or hospital libraries or any library that might need streaming media, to make the acquisition of streaming media services for our users less arduous for us?
I gave you guys some very deep questions for the end of the day.
Okay, so that's, yeah, good point. Making it easier for faculty to be able to share the resources. I think advocacy is a good place to start, you know, continually telling these service providers, we really want to be able to buy your services for our patrons. Yep, absolutely. Metrics do help in terms of defending that particular subscription. Absolutely. So thank you all for sticking with us at the very end of the day. The last slot's usually hard, so we appreciate your sticking around. And we compiled a list of some related reading. There's a couple of decision tree tools in here that could be very helpful. So we've provided a couple of citations. There is unfortunately not a lot out there on this topic right now. I think because people may be a little uneasy with giving, cut and dry answers to what are very complicated legal questions, but these resources may help you out in trying to figure it out at your library. So thank you all again for staying.
Yeah, thank you. And contact us if you guys have any questions or if you bring up anything. That's actually one of like the best tips I can give. Librarians, we help each other too. So don't ever hold back on that.
Yeah. Use your listservs.
Yes, use them all. All right, thanks everyone.
Great.